All right, let's just get right into it. If you think horror movies are gruesome, I promise you, they have absolutely nothing on what daily life was like in the Aztec Empire. We're not talking about some rare, solemn ritual here. No, we're talking about human sacrifice, but on an industrial scale. It was a brutal, high-output assembly line designed to do two things: feed the gods and terrify their enemies.
I mean, can you just imagine living in a city where the temples were permanently stained red, where the air always carried this smell of death? That was real life in the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. So it really makes you ask, how in the world does an entire civilization get built on such a terrifying foundation of blood?
Well, the logic behind all this slaughter was, believe it or not, terrifyingly simple. The Aztecs believed their gods were in a constant fight against darkness, and to keep the sun moving across the sky every single day, these gods needed energy. They needed nourishment, and that nourishment came in the form of fresh, still-beating human hearts. For the Aztecs, it was a pretty straightforward deal. No blood, no sunlight. Period.
So, to meet this divine demand, the scale of the killing had to be absolutely immense. And when you start to look at the actual numbers behind this whole brutal industry, they're truly mind-boggling. So get this, according to the Aztecs' own records, when they rededicated the Great Temple of Tenochtitlan back in 1487, they sacrificed a staggering 80,000 people. And they did it in just 4 days. I mean, just think about that rate of killing. It's almost impossible to imagine, and it really shows you their horrifying efficiency.
Now, okay, some historians today think that 80,000 number might be a bit of an exaggeration. But even the most conservative, modern estimates are still totally shocking. They put the annual death toll at around 20,000 people. This wasn't something that happened once in a while. This was a constant assembly line level of slaughter happening year after year after year.
And what happened to the bodies? Well, they weren't just tossed aside. The skulls of the victims were meticulously cleaned and then displayed on these massive racks called sompantli. And the largest one of these racks ever discovered held over 100,000 skulls. It was a permanent, gruesome warning to any and all enemies of the empire.
So you have to be wondering, where did they get all these victims? Well, the entire Aztec military machine was basically designed for one purpose: to feed the sacrificial altars. And this created a really unique way of thinking about warfare that was unlike anything else in history.
This right here, this really flips our whole understanding of battle completely on its head. For an Aztec warrior, you see, killing an enemy on the battlefield was actually a failure. It was a careless mistake. The real goal was to injure them and capture them, not to kill them. A hero wasn't the guy who killed the most enemies. No, the hero was the one who brought back the most live prisoners for the gods.
So what's really crucial to understand is that a warrior's entire social standing, his reputation, everything depended on his ability to capture enemies alive. These prisoners were the raw material for the empire's most vital industry. They were, quite literally, the currency they used to pay the gods to make sure the sun would rise another day. But capturing the victims was only the beginning. The ritual itself was a highly organized, step-by-step procedure. It was truly a masterpiece of psychological terror, and it was designed to be seen by everyone. The key instrument in this whole grisly procedure was a knife made of obsidian. Now, this is a type of volcanic glass that you can flake to an edge that is microscopically sharper than even a modern steel surgical scalpel. It was an unbelievably precise and terrifying tool. The process itself was swift, and it was brutal. The victim was held down by 4 priests on a stone altar. A 5th priest, the executioner, would use that obsidian knife to make a really fast cut just below the ribcage, reach his hand in, and physically tear out the still-beating heart. The heart was then held up as an offering to the sky, and the body was just unceremoniously kicked and rolled down the temple's steep staircase to the crowd waiting below. And just when you think it can't get any worse, the horror didn't end with death. In some rituals, the bodies were actually skinned so that priests could wear the flesh as a kind of sacred garment. In others, the bodies were dismembered and the bones were cleaned and kept as holy relics. Every single part of the victim was used. But it wasn't just captured warriors who met this fate. The Aztec sacrificial system had specific rituals for different needs, and some of them were even more disturbing, targeting the most vulnerable people in their society. Yeah,
children were considered prime offerings, especially for Tlaloc, the god of rain. The Aztecs had this dark belief that the tears of children would bring the rain. So to make sure the offering was successful, priests would deliberately make the children cry in terror right before they were drowned or burned alive.
And then you have the ritual cannibalism. Now, this was not about hunger. It was a sacred act, and it was reserved only for the elite. The arms and thighs of really brave enemy warriors were cooked and then eaten by high-ranking nobles and priests. The belief was that it allowed them to literally absorb the enemy's strength and courage. Meanwhile, for the common folks, it was just another day of eating maize.
This whole system, it wasn't just religious. It was a tool of political domination. And in the end, the very practice that made the Aztecs so feared is also what planted the seeds of their spectacular downfall.
You see, the Aztecs demanded tribute from all the states they conquered, but this wasn't just gold or goods. They enforced something called a blood tax, forcing the people they conquered to send their own men, women, and children to Tenochtitlan to be sacrificed. And as you could probably imagine, this created an absolute ocean of resentment and pure hatred.
So when Hernán Cortés and his tiny band of conquistadors showed up in 1519, they didn't have to fight the Aztecs alone, not at all. They found tens of thousands of willing allies among all those subjugated tribes, every single one of them eager for revenge. That local support, combined with a devastating smallpox epidemic, was all it took to bring the mighty empire crashing down. The Spanish were, by all accounts, horrified by what they found, and they put an end to the ritual slaughter for good.
And just like that, an empire built on a foundation of industrial-scale slaughter completely collapsed in a sea of fire, disease, and betrayal. Betrayed by the very same people it had terrorized for so long. It really leaves you with a chilling thought. When a civilization's entire logic demands such a high price in blood, is its violent end just a matter of time?